Hello and welcome to this video. In today's video I am going to be making the banqueting table for my banqueting hall of my Tudor doll's house. I am going to be using these poppy seed heads again, just like I did for my 4-poster bed. If you've not watched that video you might want to give that a watch first, but I wanted matching feet of the table for matching the bed and the table together. So I bought this big table from the Doll's House Hall in York, which is a previous video to show. I'm not going to use that table because it's far too big, but I am going to use the height of it because the height looked right in the doll's house. So I'm actually going to be using these pine pieces, which were scraps I got from B&Q. There's a little recycling tub at the exit of B&Q where you can add a donation and take what you want out of it. So I always have a good look through there when I go. So my table is going to be about 60mm high. When I measured these poppy heads, they were all about 2.5 centimetres high. It's incredible, isn't it, what nature does, because they were all pretty much the same height and the same size. There were maybe a little bit of a different width each time, so there's a little bit of variation, but actually they were all 2.5 centimetres high. So I'm going to use 2 poppy heads for each leg. So I'm just trimming them down here because I don't need those stalks this time. For the bed I did keep those stalks because I made the posts out of them, but this time actually 2 poppy heads together is making 5 centimetres, so I've only got 1 more centimetre to add in between to get to the 6 centimetre height. But actually I also need to take into account the depth of those pieces of pine wood. So I am chopping these short, and then they're not really going to have much distance between each other in height. To join them together, I'm actually going to be using these leftover straws that I had from Halloween. So I'm just going to trim them so that there's a little collar that meets in between both poppy heads. So this little collar isn't adding any height, it's just slotting over the little stumps that are on the end of the poppy heads. So I've just tried it out there for size, so I've just placed the wood over just to check it's just above the 6 centimetres, which is absolutely fine. And now I'm going to stick them down. So I'm just putting a blob of my multi-purpose glue in and sticking it like this, holding it for a minute whilst it just starts to dry, and doing the same for each one. You can see there with that straw I've got a little slit down the side just because this stump was a little bit thicker, so the straw wouldn't fit around it. This is what they looked like as they were drying, and I then held the wood over the top just to check how many planks of wood I would like. I've decided to use 3 strips of this wood for the width of my table, and so I just cut them down using a mitre block and my granddad's old saw, and cut them all down to the same size, just like this, and then I gave them a little sand. Next I laid them all together upside down. The beveled rounded edge is going to be the underside of the tabletop, and I then used a strip of card and put some glue all over it because this is what's going to hold the 3 strips together. It's going to be on the underside of the tabletop, so you won't be able to see it. I then used some wood filler on the poppy legs and the tabletop because I wanted to cover the joins between the straw and the poppy heads, and I also wanted to cover the edges of the card on the tabletop. I tried to put some scores down the card using the blunt end of a paintbrush, just so that as I put the filler over it would look as if the line of the planks was continued. I wish I'd done this in a little bit more depth because it did look better at the end when it was scored in, but one of the sides I didn't score very well. So if you are replicating this, do score down the middle bit there, it makes a big difference. Once dry, I gave it a sand down and then moved on to painting. Of course, just like all the other furniture in my house, I use my raw umber acrylic paint so that the furniture would match. I do think this is a little bit dark for this table and a little bit glossy too. I was tempted to do a wash rather than paint on fully, but I don't think the wash would have worked over the poppy legs, so I've painted it properly. I might come back to this at another time and add a little bit more tone into the table using some different browns to lighten it up a little bit. So once it was dry, I used my glue to stick the legs down. I initially did this with the table upside down, but then once the legs had started to dry, but before they were fully dry, I flipped it the right way around just to make sure that they were sitting straight. I didn't want them to dry at the wrong position. I also wanted to make sure that my table was really nice and steady before they were fully dry. Apologies for the state of my rail tabletop, it's really damaged from all of the crafting that I've done. Any suggestions for how to fix the veneer of a table and make it nicer, please do let me know. Now then, I should really put some planks along between the legs at the bottom there, because that would make it more authentic. However, at the moment I really like how the table's looking, so I'm not sure whether to or not. I've not done it at the moment. Here's the table from a distance, just for scale. So this is what it's looking like now, so I'm not sure whether to put those strips along the bottom or not. As I said before, I would still like to add maybe some lighter browns to this table. I can see some little bits where it needs a little bit of touching up, especially on the feet. But I've just laid it out now to show you how it's looking so far. Let me know if you think it needs any changes or if you think it's looking okay. I laid my little plates out that I got from my Doll's House haul in York, and the cutlery too, although there's something in the back of my head telling me that I don't think that Tudor's had all 3 items of cutlery. So if any historians know, please do let me know. I've not laid the forks out on the table for this reason. I think it's the forks that they didn't have. I'm going to have to research that. Now, one problem with this table is that it's too narrow to fit the plates on and also a feast of food. I couldn't have made my table any wider. I don't think it would have looked right in the room, especially because I need to make my benches and my little throne chairs to sit next to it. So I'll have to have a think about where all the food's going to go. Maybe I need a side table with the food on. So let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Do leave a comment, hit subscribe, like, all of that sort of stuff, and have a lovely day.